Let me explain again, Tiger Bridge, not to be confused, again, we have the sand management. We're not talking about the Tiger store at this point, the sand management. We're talking about Tiger Bridge, exactly what you're saying. So it's software only. It installs in about 5 minutes. It's completely transparent to the users and to the applications. If any of you remember, like me, the old Intel Inside, we're like that. We're at that filter driver level between the operating system and NTFS, the file system. We are inside. We're under the hood completely.
No,
And this is on the, I'm just going to ask kind of questions, right? Sure. So this is on the user devices, right? That this filter driver is installed.
It can depend. It can be in your, for example, like I said, in this case, it is on your file server. So nothing gets installed here.
Okay.
If you want to use it as a, I don't know, Dropbox kind of functionality, yes, of course you can install it on your laptops. There is a pretty good, interesting thing that we actually had to make recently based on a request from customers, is that we actually had to make an interface between supporting our product for Google Drive, and we're adding for SharePoint. Because actually, there is an interesting synergy between being able to have the data here and the data here in Google Drive format where you can actually collaborate. Because there are still a lot of people that collaborate on their file servers rather than in the cloud.
Got it. Okay, so sorry.
No, it's all right. Can I show you? Because
yes,
I have it
please.
installed on the computer. Yeah, and I apologize that we didn't maybe jump in there a little bit quickly. So the first thing I want to show you here is actually the interface for the filter driver, right? So what you're looking at here on the middle, this is Tiger Bridge. It's the user interface to set up that filter driver, okay? Now, very simply, what we've got set up is this is a folder on my PC, on my laptop. And I am doing this live because we're in Silicon Valley and I just felt we should do that, right? So, so we've got Storage Field Day 2020. That is the source folder on my laptop, this laptop right here. The target is AWS, happens to be S3. Alex mentioned that we support multiple tiers in the cloud. That's very, very important. We support not only S3, but S3 Glacier and S3 Glacier Deep, they call it these days. That ranges, the hot storage S3 that you're going to see right now is roughly around $20 a terabyte, roughly. The S3 Glacier Deep is around $1 a terabyte a month, okay? So big difference there. We support both, and we, based on what you are doing on the computer locally, we can determine whether it goes into S3 hot or Glacier Deep, which is a big difference compared to normal lifecycle managers that are looking at, did you play with the object or not? We, remember, have that perfect link between the file system here and also the object in the cloud. So what I'm going to show you here is the first, you note that there's a replication policy. The basics are real simple. You have a source, like I showed you here. You have a target, which is an S3. You have to put all your stuff in. You have a bucket, whichever bucket you set up. I have it on this thing called Milestone 2, as it turns out. A replication policy is set to 1 second. A reclaim policy, which I'll explain, is set to 1 week in this case. So without further ado.
So the replication policy of 1 second says 1 second after the file is closed, you replicate it.
Exactly. So let's do it, okay? So we're going to take this. I'm going to copy this, which happens to be a PDF, and I'm going to, into this folder, I'm just going to drop it. Now, I'm not doing anything, and if you look up there, you're going to see in a couple seconds here, depending on the internet, see the orange that just happened? It's in the cloud. It's in S3 now. So it's already been replicated. I didn't do anything because at the file system level, this is all happening. Now, what's really neat about it is that the reclaim policy, I could set it to 5 seconds if I'd like, and it can be based on last access of the file locally on this laptop.
Reclaim actually deletes the files?
Here we go. So let me show you this right now. So if you look at the properties, I don't know if you guys, can you guys see that from there? That you've got 1.13 megabytes is the size, and 1.13 megabytes on disk, it's on disk. I'm going to right click. We have a context menu here. I'm going to reclaim the space. Orange is now going to become blue. Okay, so I'm still on this file. So look at this, and let me let it update here. But if you look, it's at 0 bytes now. So what happens when we do that reclaim? It is now what we call a stub file, and you've seen just live what happens there to it. It goes to the cloud. We reclaim it when you decide. So that's based on an automated policy that you can set.
What about getting it back?
Sorry?
What about getting it back?
Perfect
Just double
question.
click or open.
Watch, so if I just double click on it, again, hands off, that is the file, and it's back from the cloud that fast, okay?
So if you-
Again, this is S3 high.
Have you copied it back?
No,
It
it's,
just pulls the data back from the cloud.
And you've now got it back on that laptop?
and you notice how it's orange now?
Yeah, that's
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any mechanism on the backend to save some money? I mean, compression while you send the data on the...
No, compression, okay, we can do compression, but it's definitely not worth the time that you spend precious on-prem time. Actually, the big money saver here is actually playing with the tiers in the cloud. Because yes, it can be hot, but for example, the typical
But
case...
actually, you could also retrieve only a chunk of the...
Let me,
That's-
yeah,
file
yeah,
that is
okay, we'll get
more-
I'm not going to go through all the slides
yeah,
because exactly your question. So let's go through these demos and explain how it works. You notice there's a picture here or what looks like a video. Again, on this one, if I right click and look at it, you're going to notice, can you see that's 110 megabytes? This is a small video, relatively small for us, 110, right? But it's 0 bytes on disk. Again, when it's blue, it's 0, okay? But watch what happens.
Not
If I-
necessarily, this means,
it-
blue means that it's not
it's-
entirely on.
Right.
on the-
It's, for instance, there are times where the
Yeah.
icon might take a little
Yeah.
bit, the metadata, et cetera, but the file, 110 megabytes, is in Amazon S3. If I double click on it, okay, and it's actually playing, that is coming out of the cloud, okay? Now, you're going to see it stutter occasionally, which is fine, but now watch this. If I grab the timeline, or scrub it as we say, right, I am scrubbing the timeline, and it is pulling data live out of S3, again, based on bridge that understands the object, a part of the object, like you said. So this is what we call a partial restore. Just to what's kind of fun about that is if we now look at this and do the old Alt-Enter,
You see that the size on disk right now is 17 megabytes. You see these numbers?
so that's the
So
partial
basically,
restore.
when he did the scrubbing, it pulled pieces here and there. So effectively, right now we have a file that is partially here, and all the data is in the cloud, but some of the data is local.
Yeah, okay. It's
Which actually,
cached locally.
yes, which is something that is. So the question was.
If I'm a customer, why am I buying this? And what are my employees going to be doing? Like, what specific application is there?
Okay,
for
the
this?
first, remember, the thing that I said originally was that one of the best usage of this technology, you can do it a lot of things, but let's say the best usage that you can always should think of is a file server. When you have a corporate file server, it is not an application server. On a corporate file server, people store anything ranging from private data to Excel spreadsheets to
So
some.
why wouldn't I use Office 365 for that? If I'm a Windows customer for that
Yes.
kind of file system, why wouldn't I just use Office 365?
Yes, for a few things. First of all, Office 365, when it goes outside the document space, like Word, Excel, etc., the only way for you to store something in Office 365 that is not a document, say, for example, I want to store my, I don't know, binary data of some kind. I need to upload it to SharePoint. That's one thing. So there are a few problems with that. SharePoint is not something that you buy on per terabyte. So basically, trying to get a 100 terabyte of a SharePoint is a challenge, and it's costly. That's one thing. Second of all is that there is practically no collaboration. SharePoint is just, whenever you need to do something, imagine that you're running, for example, AutoCAD, and you need to do AutoCAD manufacturing process or design. You cannot do it in SharePoint. So you need to download it, do something, and then upload it again. There is no workflow. SharePoint is a good thing for documents, and that's what they designed it for, and it's perfect for that. Like we were having earlier, 2 people can simultaneously work on a PowerPoint or an Excel spreadsheet. But the file servers, and actually, very rarely file servers contain just documents, because documents are very small. If you're a document type of company, probably your file server is a few terabytes. Actually, I have been going with a case with an accounting company that is primarily Excel spreadsheets. They had millions upon millions of documents, and their file server was 2 terabytes. So these people, they're not They're actually not even going to the cloud today, in terms of that way. They just put a SharePoint or a Google Drive and use it.
And if I could give you another example, one of our companies, large gaming company, 200 software developers, they had one file server. It was a 100 terabyte file server.
Yeah.
That file server was getting full. So they could either go and try to get half a petabyte, get a petabyte, whatever the on-premises storage that they were looking at that was going to be quite expensive, and go through the migration process of taking that down and getting another one. What they did instead, live, they did data migration by going to the cloud, by putting Tiger Bridge on that file server, set the policies that we were just talking about to immediately replicate so that they had a DR, a disaster recovery. But then when the file server got anything more than, say, 70, 75% full, it would start reclaiming files. And what a beautiful solution, right? 200 people under here working on this file server, they don't know the difference at all.
So it's
Every file they've ever seen is still there.
So as far as the DR perspective, you could load this on any Windows server anywhere, point to that cloud.
Yes.
With
We're
your
gonna show you-
software?
We're going to show you that.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to keep going because I want to show you that. Go ahead, Noam. Go ahead. Your other question?
No, go ahead.
So let me go ahead and jump forward. I just launched, when Alex was talking, something that's called, have you heard of something called Milestone? It's a security VMS company. It's one of the top VMS, video management system software companies. This is where you do things like, and if you look on the bottom, those are quotes, those are live cameras on my laptop. I'm not connected outside. So those are running internal just so I have a demo. And those cameras are being recorded, right? So the way that this system works is if I come over here and launch this, I'm going to show you the client that is what the people would be watching this video on, okay? So what we've done is taken our software and working with our partners, we've integrated the Tiger Bridge software inside of this application. So again, there are the live cameras there. If we're looking at the playback, the red timeline, this is local, and you can see it's moving very quickly, but I've integrated it completely inside of this application. There is no interface for Tiger at this point on it, but what I can do here is if you look back a ways, so I'm going to change the timeline, and you're going to see some pretty colors come into view. This is us. Okay, so what we've done, normally all the people see is red. We've made it so that you can see nearline, offline, and online. So that's all Tiger Bridge has been integrated into this application. So when I click here, just for fun, you're going to see a slight delay, but then the data is going to come. That's because it's coming out of S3 Live. Okay. Now I can play it as well, and again, it's not going to play perfectly for two reasons. One, there's going to be a little latency on pulling things down from the cloud, depending on what my connection is, of course. But the other thing is people typically subsample or they drop frames on purpose when they archive the footage. They don't want to store 30 frames a second. They usually store 1, 2, 5 frames a second. But you can see, again, a great application live of what we're doing with Bridge is putting it inside so the operator doesn't know where this data is and they don't really care.
So,
Go ahead.
and it's sold, so this is an application-specific implementation of Tiger Bridge?
Correct.
This is actually just to clarify, this is actually making an application-specific plugin that we're working with the partners using the Tiger Bridge API. We decided to make it open, so basically it can be, yes, of course you can use it as a system administrator the way Lance showed us, like I can specify and do the stuff manually or automatically, but actually the fact is that you can build solutions on top of that using the API about controlling which data is there, which is exactly what...
your software.
Excuse me?
They are OEMing your software.
Exactly.
Yeah, and if you look at the screen, what I'm showing you, this is inside of Milestone. This is where you set up all the Milestone particulars, the alarms, the cameras, everything. And you see we're a tab, or we're a setting in here. This is showing you that they're recording to a main recording, what they call a live drive, and then after an hour it archives it to another on my computer, still here. And we pick it up, and you can see that online I've only got 1%. All that nearline, I've got 99% is actually in the cloud. So it means I don't have to have a huge amount of storage locally. I could have some maybe really fast NVMe SSD, a couple terabytes, but I can cache or have it basically connected to the cloud and extended into the cloud, And to the operators and to the application, it looks like the data is local.
But are you getting it all
That's-
back then when
No,
they want to view it? Or?
Two things that we've done. We've made it so that in the application, if they really need to like pull back, say, an hour or a couple hours of something, we've put this on the left where you can, on the calendar, you can say, I want to get this camera, the bike park camera, again, this is us. I want to get the bike park camera from this time to this time, make it local because I want to play with it for a while, and then it will reclaim it back afterwards. So you can do that, but in addition, the other thing we're doing is the main thing that people care about is extension and also something called disaster recovery, right? So disaster recovery is where I'm backing up not only all of their video data, but any of the database XML files and anything else that they need, Milestone, to recreate their entire database so that if I crash here, and we've got it set up so that Alex is going to show you what happens if I have a complete and utter crash, he can go to his computer, log on to that bucket, as you said, and instantly all those stub files, the metadata only files, populate into a file system on his computer. He can see everything. If he wants a part of it, he pulls it back. If he wants all of it, he pulls it back.
Wouldn't it be much better to start a machine up in the cloud and do it over there?
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of, sorry, go ahead.
We actually have deployments that are doing this. This we made for customers that are interested to migrate their workflow in the cloud, but they're trying to make it a completely non-disruptive process, which means that when you go into a typical facility, you end up is that some of the machines are ready to go to the cloud without any disruption of the process, but some of the machines are not. For example, your document machines are typically good enough in the cloud as well as on-prem, but there are some production machines that are not. What people are doing is that if they have, normally they start with a file on-prem workflow, all machines connecting to a local network to a file server. What we allow them to do is basically connect this file server to an object storage in the cloud, then run a VM in the cloud, and create a sync policy, which we also have a sync policy that will allow multiple servers to sync between themselves using a let's say, object storage repository. Effectively, what happens is that by doing so, they create the same replica of this file server in the cloud. And then they start moving some of the machines. And actually, what we see is they end up in this hybrid environment in which some of the machines are there and some of the machines are here, and they are still using the same data because we're syncing the two file servers, one in the cloud and one in on-prem with an object store.
What happens when you don't have the filter driver? I've used filter drivers for Windows before.
Yeah.
But without the filter driver present in a native environment, you immediately can see something or not something, right?
Okay, let me quickly then, this is kind of important. One of the engineering decisions that we actually had to make is how to implement that.
Yeah.
And there are various ways. When you have to choose the right technology, and basically in Windows, you have the choice of doing a standard things that are implemented by the object. For example, you can use symlinks. The problem with symlinks is that they're very, very limited in terms of compatibility with applications. For example, in our world, the media site where we come from, the main market leader for video editing is called Avid, and Avid does not work with symlinks. So basically, if you implement the solution with symlinks, you're just sacrificing a big chunk of your potential media market. So yes, we wanted to make something that works in any case. So we discarded the possibility of using something that is built in, like the symlinks into the environment. And then we actually had to choose between what is called the reparse point in Windows and basically made a normal file with a filter. The problem with reparse points is that they're made for being easier to deploy such solutions. And we do not use reparse points because practically from our perspective, you still need to make a filter driver with reparse point in order to accommodate with some of these functionalities that is like partial restore. This partial restore actually is a file that is half here, and yes, we're using sparse files. So technically, we ended up with using sparse file. What you're seeing here is a standard concept in Windows, which, by the way, has it in Linux and everywhere, which is a sparse file, which is a file that is not fully here. So yes, if you remove the filter, you will see a sparse file, which is a problem because when you remove our filter, for example, if you disconnect right now our filter, you'll see this file. But if you try to read it, all the places where the data is not on disk, the Windows would return zeros.
Yeah, because you need privileged access. For example, if you were using AI type antivirus like Cylance, it would see some very peculiar behavior.
I understand, and that's been practically most of our effort is actually focused in practically deploying it properly. And you would be surprised to when we see that very, very few applications, like antiviruses in particular, are made to follow the guidelines that are set up by the operating system. So basically, some of the antiviruses works in such a way that no other filter can work, etc. So there are plenty of challenges there.
The limitation is the ecosystem I'm seeing is that, great potential because you can go to the auto tier in the cloud, but if your link is down, and if you don't have the availability and you didn't cache it, then you're going to have a workflow issue.
Which, by the way, is the case with every solution out there. Actually, with some of the
when you start to talk cloud. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But basically, because there was mentioned here about Lucid Links and Google, I mean, it's even worse because they're virtual file system. You drop the link, you don't have data at all. Here, you can have the data which is already here. For example, right now, if we disconnect the wireless, I would be able to open this file, which is here, because my policy haven't reclaimed it yet.
Well, the orange, but not the blue.
But not the blue.
Correct.
But not the blue. But typically in the user scenario, people are reclaiming data that they haven't accessed for a while. For example, on a typical file server, one of the policies that normally people set up is like any data that hasn't been accessed for 6 months, just reclaim it.
Yeah.
What is the chance that you need tomorrow something that you haven't touched for 6 months?
Are you also RBAC enabled or just ACL? Because you do LDAP integration with Active Directory.
Just because we are integrating to the file system, anything that is basically we replicate anything in the file system. That includes ACLs. So how you interpret the ACLs, which means that what kind of security authority you use for the interpreting ACLs is outside our. We do not impose control restrictions ourselves. We maintain them so the operating system can make its job. But it's made to be completely transparent. And one thing that I would like really to discuss and hopefully he can show is a little bit about we actually, because of, remember that we ended up doing a hybrid workflow, we were not trying to focus on moving the data from on-prem to the cloud. Of course, that's the main things, especially the cloud providers are interested in. But we tried to make a solution that would be a true hybrid, which means that move the data back in a lot of ways.
Yeah, let me go ahead and show, because we're running out of time. So I just copied a file. You guys are going to recognize this. I'm going to paste it into this. Anybody recognize that file already? It's a little picture. It was a screen grab off of your website. So Stephen, this is for you. Now, again, hands off, it replicated into S3. We've also integrated what's called AWS Lambda. It's a, quote, serverless compute, right? So what we're doing there is just, again, hands off for me. It's set to a 10-second sync policy that we have it set, depending, again, on the bandwidth I've got. So what it did is it put that into S3, and then after it looks at it, it goes through and it looks at this Lambda, or runs a Lambda function on it. And again, live demo, so let's see what happens here.
You need to copy it to the AI folder.
Yeah, no, it's there. So I'll tell you what I'll do. Let me do this one quick one here. I'll go grab oh no, I took
one question. How is this priced?
How is what?
How's this priced? How is it per
Cost. How much does it cost?
Yeah.
How's it priced?
Yeah. So is it per server? Or?
Yes. The business model is based on terabytes of managed data, capacity of managed data. So we are trying to be friendly to the way the people are paying to the cloud, because normally when they go to, let's say, I don't know, AWS, they pay for the amount of terabyte they store. So our cost is a fraction, and it's the same model. So basically, if you move 20 terabytes of data, our license is based on 20 terabytes of the use.
In addition to the egress charges.
Yeah, that's it.
Yes, although the egress charges, actually you would be surprised that in these cases that we're discussing, there are very few egress charges. Because like I said, if you're a file server and this gets replicated to the cloud, and the chance of you having to pull back data that you have reclaimed, which means that you haven't used for 6 months, is pretty minimal. And that's the only case where you get charged. Of course, if you happen to lose your local storage and then you need to pull all your data, that's where people don't complain about charges because they lost their data. And
Okay, now that,
One is, so is it a subscription then, or is a?
it depends. It's pay as you go,
Okay.
pretty much similar to the cloud model. But actually, what we've seen, and especially when you go to environments like like the surveillance that he showed or something, people are actually still more interested to buy it in CapEx mode.
so we're going to run out of time. So that was my fault. I put it in the wrong folder. So this is the folder. You notice it's orange now. Again, this came from the website. But you see what happened? It automatically did the following. It did OCR, and Rory, I'm sorry, it missed an I. But in fairness, that's Amazon recognition doing this, not us. We just moved the data, right? Yeah. So, but you see what it did? It did OCR automatically without me doing anything. And then also, just for fun, we also translated it to Spanish. That took less than 10 seconds for it to do that. We moved the data. We can run any of these cognitive services. That's one of the biggest reasons why we have this ability. We enable you to put your data in the cloud where you then have access to all these cognitive services.
You can do rendering and all sorts of things like that.
This is just showing what you can do. It's not our job to do translations and OCRs.
Right.
Linking.
What are your biggest verticals? So obviously you've shown us surveillance. We've talked about media. Could you go into that more, and what are the verticals?
Well, actually, this is anything that is using Windows. Storing data.
Who are you selling to now?
To people with file servers. We have oil and gas companies storing Windows data. We have gaming studios storing data. Yeah, of course, you can argue that it's media and entertainment. We have like accounting companies, like I just mentioned, storing and replicating their data. So that's the thing, is that because it just fits into a Windows file server, anything that you can use NTFS for, we can help you with.
And if one more thing real quickly, because again,
yes,
we're going to run out of time. If you look what I just did here, the other thing, if I drop a picture in there, again, within the 10 seconds, anyone want to read the tags there? This is really critical. Even if this picture is not here, if it's reclaimed and the data is only in S3, we can run the recognition service, one of those Lambda functions, in the cloud, and it came back and it object recognized it, if you will. It did object recognition. Citrus, fruit, food, fruit, plant, orange, grapefruit, etc. This one over here, it's going to say things like computer, keyboard hardware, PC, laptop. That was done within seconds, but what's most important about that is we can also, inside of the Windows Explorer search, if I type in laptop, even if this picture is only in the cloud, we have backfilled the metadata and brought it back into the local file system as tags, so that, forget an asset management system just for a second for basic operations, you can type in what you're looking for, and if you've run this recognition in the cloud seconds earlier, it will still find it even though it may not be on your computer. So if you want it, double click it, it comes right back.
And just one last note, because you asked about possible applications, just let me quickly tell you a kind of a more personal story, or more fun one. I have 2 sons at home, and they at the age that they play a lot of video games. That's what they like doing. So they have their own computers, and each computer has the Steam platform where I'm buying games for them. So basically, because of the games are very time-critical applications, so I ended up buying them SSD drives so they can play fast enough and have a very good performance on their games. The problem is that when I bought their computers with SSD drives, the SSDs were relatively expensive. So they are equipped with 256 gigabyte SSD drive, which is not the standard today, but that's what it was back then. The problem today is that most of the games that they like to play are 50, 60 gigabytes each. So effectively, they started asking me to buy them bigger drives because they can install 3 games and that's it. So what I tried, and I was playing with that, and actually this was even a surprise to myself, is basically I use Tiger Bridge, I put it in on their drive, and I pointed Tiger Bridge to my wife's computer, which is in the same room, which has a 4 terabyte spinning drive. So I pointed it over the network. What Tiger Bridge did is that it removed some of the not accessed data from the game. So anyway, the long story short is that ever since I installed that, they keep installing games. And basically what happens is that the data overflows from their cache SSD drive to the network drive. And actually, I have been monitoring this and playing a little bit. You'll be surprised how little fraction of a modern game you actually need to play. I have been doing some experiments about completely reclaiming 100% of a game, then started playing, it brings back what it's needed, and then you look at how much data you pulled back, and you'll find it probably 10%.
I have one question. When you have a sync point between the cloud and the local file system, and you have access to the data in both places, right?
Yeah.
And the sync point is some point in time that data is actually replicated.
Yep.
But are you replicating it again in the cloud, so you have twice the amount of data, or is it?
No. Basically, if I understand your question correctly, you're asking what happens if you continuously modify the data, and especially from multiple locations?
Yes, yes.
Yes, because locking in the cloud would be prohibitive in terms of performance. Actually, with the new version, we have the capability for certain types of files, say document files, to do so. So when it's open here, you will not allow it to open there. But
normally you don't have that. Normally you don't have that sort of locking capability.
No, because it will be the latency to use the cloud. I mean, imagine what will happen if every open to the NTFS actually takes 1 second of latency to lock it in the cloud. That's basically what kills most of the applications. So instead of that, we have what is called eventual consistency. So even if you modify it independently on these two, basically the last one wins. So basically it will replicate, and always the last modified version wins. Which, by the way, is a very similar concept if you're using, let's say, if this file server is a lot of the Linux implementations that do not have the locking and access, you get the same behavior anyway.
And we don't quite have time to show you the doing the disaster recovery, but as soon as we're off camera, we'd be happy to show you, and all we'll do is, again, what Alex can do from his computer, connect to that same cloud that I was doing the milestone demo. All of those stub files will come in, and we're happy to show it to you right here, and we'll be doing it live.
We have a mechanism which we call dynamic rehydration of these data, which means that the problem actually is that people don't realize how long it takes to actually access an object. So basically, if you have a file server with 1 million files and you try to just access them, it may take weeks, no matter the cloud provider where you are.
You can't defy the laws of physics.
No, absolutely.
He's working.
No, but my point is that what we actually made is we allow you to mount the file system, and basically upon access to a particular folder, we rehydrate the metadata, which actually is very powerful because you can start working with your data immediately after a disaster rather than wait.
So customers wouldn't be using backup tools or something like that, because the backup tool is going to try to read every file that's out there.
No, well, not actually. First of all, I agree, that's a challenge. But in theory, in the operating system, there are certain flags which, if the backup tool is right properly, like offline, that shouldn't do that. Additionally, we have the capability of blacklist an application, because obviously there are applications that do not. So we can actually, when we see a call coming from an application, you can say no.
You have 1 minute to tell them about the partial update.
Yes, and the last thing that I said, you saw the partial restore about putting some data. Actually, we have been working with a partner on a very interesting solution recently, which will be kind of released to the market soon, which was focusing on Veeam, actually. The problem is that Veeam has their capability of what is called a partial differential backup, which practically means that when they create a backup, they create only the deltas, and they merge the last data into a very large file, which practically means that every day, for example, when you're doing a differential backup, every day you're modifying your big file, which means that any solution like ours would actually every day would move all the data to the cloud, which is not very efficient. So we actually made a concept that would allow you to track the modified ranges within a file, and when you have to update to the cloud, we update only these ranges, which is just...
Yeah, which is pretty huge.
Yeah.
being able to do that.
In an object store.
Exactly.
Exactly, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.